What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you have experienced? Preface. When I was in high school, my little sister, Mom, and I would eat dinner together every evening and tell each other about our days. At the time my sister was young, only in elementary school. On a Monday during summer break we were all having dinner and my sister told us about how she and our next door neighbors were playing with their new cat when it got loose outside. They had to spend the whole day looking for it. Fast forward 2 days at dinner time, and my sister tells the exact same story she had 2 days prior. My mom and I looked at each other funny because we both clearly remembered the cat story. When we asked my sister if she had mistaken the day since she told us the story on Monday, she just gave us this blank look and had no memory of it. The creepy part is when we called our neighbors to ask them about the cat incident, they told us all of it happened that day, Wednesday, and they weren't even in town on Monday. So my sister told us a story 2 days before it happened and had no memory of it. How is that possible? Where was my sister on Monday? My mother did all her GYN appointments with a doctor in downtown Austin. He was in the 5th floor of this hospital building and had a long-time nurse, receptionist named Allison. I remember attending her appointments when I was little, and my mother would make a game out of finding the office and being in the waiting room, which was colorfully decorated with a forest scene. Allison was a super sweet woman who was half babysitter for us kids, too. She would read us books and give us coloring books and occasionally even listen to our dreadful knock-knock jokes. We all referred to her as Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, years down the road, I got married and pregnant and started searching for an OB since I had moved back to Austin relatively recently before that. My mother suggested I go see if that drive, who was super young, low 30s, when I was born, was still in business. Well, I could not find his name in the hospital directory, so I figured I would just swing by the office and check. My mother happened to be in town, she had moved years ago, and came with me. We both joked about it being so familiar but reversed situations now. As we reached the stairs, we ran into a problem. There was no 5th floor of this hospital office building. Odd. We both must have misremembered it. We knew it was on the top floor, so it must have been the 4th. Nope, not there. We thought maybe we were in the wrong building. Except we parked in the same parking garage thing from 20 years ago and walked the same route. That drive does not exist. Never did, apparently. My mother and my brother and I are the only ones who remember him and Alice in Wonderland. We have asked around, including among the hospital staff. We even looked up our birth certificates, which are new copies, and just list attending physician. One of my childhood memories is fake but shared with my brother and my mother. Before making an offer on our house, my husband and I went for a viewing with our 3-year-old daughter, whom we left with a babysitter the first time we saw the house. As we walked in, I told her she could choose a bedroom. She said, "I want the dinosaur room," and ran upstairs. Okay, 3-year-olds say random stuff. A moment later, she called out, "Here it is." And sure enough, the closet of her bedroom was covered with dinosaur stickers. My husband, the realtor, and I were all freaked out. The kid acted like she knew the stickers were there, but none of us remembered seeing them before, and we certainly hadn't talked about them. The house was vacant and immaculately clean. It was an estate sale. We left the stickers up. More coincidence than glitch, but another fun layer. My daughter shares a name with a Pokemon, which we didn't know at the time. Years later, when she got into Pokemon, she recognized her namesake was also part of the sticker collection. I remember when I was around 7 or 8, and at the time I had pretty bad sleep paralysis. However, one night I went to bed and in the middle of the night I began having what I thought was an episode: can't move, can't scream, hearing static. However, it was absolutely evident that the shadow of an adult figure was sitting on the edge of my bed. I know this is a common misconception among the sleep paralysis crowd because your mind is going into self-defense due to the nature of your current situation. You begin to see and hear things. But what freaks me out about that night is I then fell asleep and dreamt that I was in that exact situation again, and I was able to move this time. I was able to project my voice. I completely lost it and started throwing everything about the room, kicking and screaming. The shadow got up, opened the door and left. In the morning I woke up and my room was a mess. The covers were on the floor and my bedroom door was open. I couldn't sleep with the door open because it freaked me out. There was something about that dream that always felt so real. 20 plus years ago now, and it's as fresh in my mind now as it was then. I have two stories that I've never quite been able to explain. The first one definitely counts as a glitch, but I'm not too sure about the second. I'll tell it anyway, though. So the first story happened well over a decade ago, and I've posted about it before in another thread, but I was so freaked out by it that I remember it vividly to this day. When I was around 9 or 10 years old, I had this bunk bed with a ladder that would hook onto the metal base that held up the top bunk. To be honest, it was kind of a hazard, but I survived, so I'll call that a win. Anyway, this one day I was at my childhood friend's house, chilling in her room with her as we watched one of those infamous early 2000s kids shows. I think it might have been the Amanda Show. At some point I began to drift off to sleep. When I was in that weird twilight state between being asleep and awake, I started to see what I can only describe as kind of a movie in my head. I could tell I was at least partially awake, because I was aware of my surroundings. I could hear the chirping of my friend's guinea pigs in the background and the soundtrack of her TV show. The images I was seeing had this super surreal quality to them. They were transparent, like I could see through them to the darkness behind my eyelids. I saw myself in them, at my house, in my bedroom. My friend was standing on the right side of me, my brother was standing on my left, and I was standing in front of the ladder to my bunk bed. Behind me, there was a small table which stood against the wall of my bedroom. I saw myself start to climb up on my ladder, and somehow I knew I was trying to get something off of my bed. I slept on the top bunk. As I climbed the ladder, I began to fall backwards, and I knew I was going to hit my head on the table. With a jolt, I snapped back to full alertness, sitting bolt upright in my friend's bed, breathing hard as my heart pounded in my chest. I told my friend about what I'd seen, and after a few moments I managed to calm down and put it out of my head. A couple of hours later, we decided that I was going to spend the night at my friend's house. I called my mum to ask for permission before my friend and I walked down the street to my house. I gathered up my clothes, pajamas, etc., and then went to grab something from my bed. As I was preparing to climb the ladder up to my bed, I froze. I realized that my friend was standing on my right, and my brother was on my left. Behind me was the little table. I hesitantly pulled the ladder toward me, only to realize that there was no resistance whatsoever. It was completely unhooked from my bed, leaning up against it. If I had begun to climb it before checking to see if it was properly hooked to my bed, my weight would have pulled it backward, and I would almost definitely have hit the back of my head on the little table behind me. I went and told my mom about the incident, still in shock. I didn't know how my ladder had come unhooked from my bed, since it was securely fastened that morning when I'd left for school. My mom looked at me with an expression between shock and horror as she revealed to me that she'd taken down my ladder earlier that day while I was at school because she was afraid my little brother would try to climb up onto my bed and fall. When I'd called her to let her know I was coming home to get some stuff to spend the night at my friend's house, she'd put the ladder back, not realizing that it wasn't hooked onto my bed. I had no idea before that day that my mom had a habit of removing the ladder from my bed when I wasn't home. Doctor had a weird, half-asleep vision of myself falling and hitting my head on a table because my bunk bed ladder was unhooked. Went to climb said ladder. Remembered dream. Realized ladder was unhooked. Avoided death. or severe bodily harm. My second story happened a few years ago. I was somewhere around 20 or 21 years old. I'm 24 now, and I was visiting my mum for the Christmas break. It was December 23rd. I was exhausted after the 2-plus-hour bus trip, on top of the previous few hours I'd spent filling my mother in on what I'd been up to the past few months at university. My mother and stepfather were asleep on the living room couches, and I was sitting on the love seat flipping aimlessly through unappealing late-night TV shows. Sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. I decided that I wanted to go to bed, but I kept flipping through the channels. I wanted nothing more than to just go and crash after my long and hectic day, but for whatever reason I felt like I couldn't just yet. There was something I still had to do before I could go to bed. But I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. After a while I started to get angry. It was like I was fighting with myself, one half of me wanting to go to bed, while the other half insisted that I had to wait. Wait for what, though? All of a sudden, I heard this loud snapping sound from beside the TV. I stood up to check it out, and realized to my horror that the cable to the little space heater in the living room had caught fire. It was an old space heater with a cord my stepfather had spliced together to fix it after it had broken, and the exposed pieces of the wire had been wrapped in electrical tape. I yelled fire at my sleeping parents, and my stepfather jolted awake and lunged to his feet to grab the heater, by which time I had already yanked the cord out of the wall and ran outside with the heater. Once I was sure that the fire had died out and the heater was safe, I went back inside, leaving the heater out on the concrete front stoop, flooded with adrenaline. After a few moments spent calming myself down, the adrenaline rush subsided and I thought once again that I was exhausted and wanted to go to bed. I realized that feeling like I was waiting for something was gone, and I fell into bed and went to sleep. I did taekwondo for 10 years, and my dojang always had yearly summer picnics with food for everyone and games for the kids. One year, the picnic was held at a pavilion in a forest preserve. My friend and I got bored. We were 12 over the games, but not cool enough to hang with the teenagers, so we decided to follow this tiny path we found leading into the woods. The path came to a few crossroads, but we decided not to split up, just in case one of us got lost. We left stick markers at each crossroads in the shape of arrows, too, just in case. We walked for what felt like hours, eventually having to cross several roads that cut through the woods, and at one point passing what looked like an old factory or mill. After a while of following a stream, sweaty and mosquito-bitten, we came to an old, crumbling set of stone walls and an open half-dome structure decorated with colorful tiles that looked like the front altar of a church. We were fascinated. I was super convinced we'd just found the ruins of some old church no one else had ever discovered. It had Latin writing on the sides, and very worn mosaics depicting the globe, a lamp, lighthouse, and a star with radiating beams of light. Awesome, right? However, my friend and I realized that our parents were probably really worried about us, as we hadn't told anyone we were leaving to explore the woods. It was 2006 and we were 12, so we didn't have cell phones. We made our way back to the pavilion as quickly as we could, following our little markers, and emerged from the forest to find my mum on the phone with someone and her mum standing by. They were obviously very relieved to see us, and also very upset that we just wandered off without telling anyone. Later that evening, when she had cooled down, I told my mom about the ruins we had found. I don't know if she believed me, but she thought it was interesting. Fast forward about 5 years. I'm in high school, and my friends and I are enjoying our summer by grabbing iced coffees and exploring our town's downtown area. My hometown is a touristy little town on a river. One of my good friends suggested we go to the shrine. I had no idea what he was talking about, so he said, "It's this little rundown Catholic shrine out in the woods behind the old government building." Instantly, I thought of the ruins and was a little spooked, but I had to go see it. My friends and I hopped a fence and hiked out into the woods behind the government building for about 10 minutes, and sure enough, there were the ruins. They looked exactly how I had remembered them, and were right next to a stream like the one my friend and I had followed to get to it years prior. I told my friends the story, and they were perplexed. They told me that there was no way we could have traveled through straight up woods to get to the shrine, because it was in a tiny patch of forest that was bordered on one side by the government building, on another by a neighborhood, and the other by the river. They even took me to the edge of the path that was behind said neighborhood to show me. I didn't believe them, so when I got home, I pulled up Google Maps to do some research. First off, the town that the TKD Picnic Forest Preserve was in does neighbor my hometown, but it is on the side of that town that doesn't border mine. Second of all, my friends were right. The patch of woods containing the shrine in my hometown were completely closed off by the river, the government building, and the neighborhood. There is no way we could have exited the pavilion into the forest preserve and ended up in the spot where the shrine was actually located by simply walking through the woods for an hour or two. I still go and visit the shrine on occasion when I'm home. It's a cool place, and is still beautiful. I haven't reached out to my TKD friend about my discovery, as we grew apart about a year after the fact. Maybe I should. TL. A shrine in the woods appears and then reappears in an impossible place years later. This happened to my family, if not me personally. Thanks to time zones, it's also a confusing story to tell. My brother was taking a trip out west. From my dad's perspective, he dropped my brother off at the airport before work. My brother was supposed to have over an hour before his flight, followed by a 4-hour flight. After work, about 8 hours later, my dad received a phone call from my brother. So, from dad's perspective, my brother should have been at his destination for less than 3 hours. But, to my brother, he took his flight, got to his destination, was picked up by his friends, went to dinner, spent the night, spent the following day sightseeing, and called my dad that evening. He thought he had been there over 24 hours. The confusion ended in a weird argument, but both stick to their version of events and both have things like printouts of flights to prove that they were right. I have no idea how either dad lost today or my brother gained one. I don't know how crazy this is compared to others, but this happened last night while I was on the phone with my girlfriend. I was telling her about my day and ended my sentence. It shouldn't be like that. I then heard static and my voice echoing, repeating back just the sentence. It shouldn't be that way. The phone call went back to normal and my GF couldn't remember which one she heard. Did I glitch out to another parallel universe where I chose to end my sentence with the other words? A couple of days ago my friend and I happened to be driving through the same town. I was getting gas over the state line because it's 30 cents cheaper and he was coming back from the mall. We get to work later that night and he starts telling people how I was speeding down the road and he couldn't keep up with me. I told him I saw him pass by me when I was pulling out of the gas station, so I don't know how I could have gotten ahead of him. He said he saw me pulling out of Dollar General ahead of him. Either my friend saw the same model and color of Versa from out of state with a driver that looks like me screwing around with an iPod drive up the same road I live on, which would be weird because we live in the middle of goddamn nowhere, or glitch in the Matrix. Either way is kinda funny. This isn't super freaky or anything, but one time I walked back from my first class to my dorm room and sat on my futon while talking to my roommate. She was pretty tired and while in the middle of talking and ruffling through her backpack she gets quiet and pulls out her agenda book. It is soaked through with water. Everything else in her backpack was perfectly dry, and we were both searching it for any wetness. She hadn't taken her agenda book out of her backpack in a week and hadn't put any water bottles in her backpack within that week to get it wet. It hadn't rained for a week and a half, so we were both mystified by where this water came from. I just assumed she was too tired to remember properly. So I was still sitting on the futon and I stood up. The area of one of my legs that was pressed against the futon was completely soaked through with water. No other part of me was wet. There was no liquid near me at all. On again, although a portion of my pants were soaked, none of the surrounding were wet. The area of the futon my pants were pressed against was perfectly dry. This might not have been too exciting of a story, but my roommate and I were never able to come up with explanations. While I was living in Denver, I had a friend flying into town to visit. The Denver National Airport was about 30 minutes away and her flight was scheduled to get in around 11:15 p.m. At exactly 10:30 p.m. I get a text message from her saying, "I just landed. Are you here?" Assuming her flight arrived early, we immediately started rushing to the airport while I kept trying to call her, only to have her phone go to voicemail. I thought maybe her phone had died or something, so I continued to refresh the flight info page on our way there, but it kept saying the plane was still in transit. We ended up getting to the airport before 11:15, and with no word from my friend or new information about the flight, we circled the airport and waited until 11:15 or so, when I get the exact same text message she had sent me at 10:30 p.m. I call her, she picks up, and I asked her if she texted me while she was on the plane. She said there was no way she could have, since she had her phone turned off the entire time. When I finally met up with her, I asked to compare our text conversations in our phones. I had two of the same texts from her, one at 10:30 p.m. and one at 11:15 p.m., while her conversation read only sent at 11:15 p.m. She confirmed that she hadn't typed it out prior either. Her phone was completely off. Glitch in the Matrix made me waste 15 minutes circling an airport. I'm not sure if this really counts as a glitch, but still creepy and unexplained. A bit of context: I dated my ex. Important detail, she had long hair at this point, then we drifted away for a while, then we went back together in a relationship. She cut it short at that point. During the relationship I had a dream where she was there. However, her dream version was in the past, as she still had her long hair. In the dream she avoided me and acted really strange, as if we weren't together, just like it would have been during the drifted apart period. I was weirded out, but not much, since it was a dream, right? Well, I told her about the dream, and turns out that she had dreamt the exact same dream as me. Except little detail, hers was 2 years before. Exactly during the time when she had long hair and we weren't in each other's lives. She remembers being weirded out because in the dream I acted like if we were together, and our both descriptions of both the place and the people present in the dream matched perfectly. It was a house party with lots of people and some common friends. Also, it had lots of strange rooms with bizarre stuff like certain animals, objects, or simply the layout of the rooms that made it impossible to just be a coincidence. TL. Dr. Multiplayer dream with my ex, with a 2-year gap between both perspectives. When I was 10, I had a pet goldfish disappear on me. I suspected it was my best friend's dog who ate the goldfish, as he was always very interested in the contents of the bowl. When I confronted my friend with this theory, he informed me, to my amazement, that I never had a goldfish. Why did I have the bowl? My friend was in the other room and I started meditating, then tried projecting a thought to him. He came up to me later and said he saw my face and I started talking to him. Has made me a bit paranoid if people can hear my thoughts. There was one night during the mid-90s when I was with my ex and there was a big yellow-orange full moon out, so we decided to go out for a drive. We lived in a small West Texas town, so we didn't have to go too far to be out of town and into the countryside. After a short drive, she decided to become lovey-dovey, so we were nearing a smaller town with a rest area just on the outskirts of the town. We parked and instantly, the mood changed and she picked up on it too. There was a van that was parked further down in the area, and for some reason, my eyes kept going to it. I kept feeling like we were being watched even though I couldn't see anyone in the front area of the van. My ex goes from being loving to apprehensive and she asked me what's wrong, but I couldn't explain it. Everything just felt off, the moon, the van, the area, the music, and I just had a feeling like we weren't supposed to be there or that we were interrupting something. I had the terrible feeling that the car wasn't going to start, which would have put us in a really bad situation because there was absolutely no one around, except for whoever was in the van. And it was night time, so the little town, which was still about a mile or two away, was mostly closed except for gas stations. This was also before cell phones were mainstream and affordable, so we didn't have that luxury. Fortunately, the car started and we got the hell out of there, but as we were leaving, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw that a few people had gotten out of the van and were looking in our direction. I'm not sure if it classifies as a glitch, but I think we both picked up on something that night that may have saved our lives, and it was definitely creepy.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.